My opponent is Ashwin Subramanian. He's the man who has instituted Pursue Your Chess Scholarship in the Help Chess Foundation. He's helping many kids in chess. He's also the former ACO World Under-1800 Champion. He opens the game with 1 e4 e5 and we have the Scotch opening on the board with d4. I take the pawn, which is the main move, and now knight takes d4. Now I play a very sideline, which is bishop b4 check. c3 is the main move here, but bishop d2 inaccurate. This is not a good move, and that's why I'm taking my time. I know something is wrong. Yes, I cannot take the knight because my bishop on b4 would be hanging and white is better. But here black has a strong move. What is it? Queen to e7, excellent move because I protect my bishop. He takes with the knight, but knight b5 was the better move. Knight takes c6, and now here's my chance to win material. It's important sometimes to just take your time in the opening. Queen takes e4 check, puts his queen out. I take on d2, knight takes d2, queen takes e2 and bishop e2. You'll see that white has developed a lot of his pieces, but I have a decision to make, to take with the b pawn or the d pawn. Taking with the d pawn is correct because it opens up my bishop, but I was ambitious. I didn't want a symmetrical pawn structure, so I took with the b pawn. But you can see sometimes when you're facing an opponent, you get a little bit unrealistic. Knight f6, actually knight e7 was better, but I went knight f6, rook e1, and now castles. And Ashwin now comes up with an excellent move. He puts his bishop on f3. This puts me in grave difficulty. I can't play d6 because my pawn on c6 is hanging. I can't push c5 because my rook on a8 is hanging. So in order to overcome these troubles, I have to figure a way out. My bishop on c8 is not very active. I need to play d6, so I go rook to b8. I put the rook on a half open file. I want to go rook b6, then d6, and then c5, get the bishop out. That was my plan. Now Ashwin could have played knight e4, exchanging the knights, but he went knight to c4. Here it seems like I needed to figure out what was the best way to proceed. Maybe it was just to wait with g6. You will see that I'm burning a lot of time on my clock. Not very comfortable with the position. It's a 5-minute plus 0-second increment game. So c5 was played here. It's okay. Not the best move, but pretty decent. He goes knight to e5, putting more pressure here. And now a very good move would have been rook to b6 first, then pushing the knight away with d6. You can see that Ashwin has some compensation for the pawn. He's very focused. He's also playing very fast, putting me under time trouble. d6 played on the board, hitting the knight. The knight comes into c6. And already white is the one who is pushing. But I had seen that he cannot take the a7 pawn, because if he were to take knight takes a7, then bishop d7 and the knight is trapped here on a7. So that's not a good move. So Ashwin now taking his time and realizes that knight e7 is the correct move. King h8, and guys, here is a very powerful move. He takes the bishop instantly. I take it back, and moves in with the rook to the 7th rank. So Ashwin playing really quick, but here was his best chance. He should have played knight d5, bishop d5, and white is the one who's pushing there. But okay, after takes rook e7, I go king g8. And now black is better because he's slowly stabilizing his position. His pieces are getting active and he's a pawn up. And also on the time, I still have 2 minutes left. I go king to f8, hitting the rook. The rook is protected, but a very good idea now could have been to play maybe rook e3. You know, the thing is, my threat is rook e8, and if he takes rook c7, the rook would hang on e1. But he plays b3, and this allows me very quickly to exchange the rooks. This should not have been allowed. Ashwin takes it, but now after knight e8, you can see that the pressure has subsided. The bishop is no longer dangerous. The rook alone on the e file can't do much, and my plan is simple: to expand in the center with c6 and d5. King d2 played in the position. Time wise, Ashwin still has a minute and 10 seconds more on the clock, but position wise, black is taking over. So c6 played here, and now a4 to push my rook away from b6. d5, Pawns nicely positioned. Yes, my king is cut off down the e file, but not for long. My plan is to get rook b7 to e7 and free my king. King c3 played. The only thing I have to be super careful about is the time. Rook to b7 played. Where does Ashwin go now from here? He brings his king to d3. Maybe he wants to play c4 here. I get the rook on e7, offering a trade. If he does not accept it, I get the control of the e file, which was not really acceptable for Ashwin here. He takes his time, he thinks, and he picks up the rook. King takes e7, played c4 in the position. Yeah, and forgets to press the clock. I remind him, and there you go, king d6. Black is slowly and steadily bringing his pieces up the board. Now I'm a pawn up. Next plan is to somehow get the knight into the game. h4, good move by Ashwin. He's trying to gain space on the other side of the board. How should I continue? I didn't want to play d4 just as yet. There is fluidity in my structure, so I should keep it. Knight to f6, improving my knight's position. The plan was to get knight to d7 to e5. Ashwin pushes his g-pawn. Knight d7 played. And now there is a deadly threat of giving a check and winning the bishop here. So he has to decide whether to move the bishop to e2 or d1 or to move his king away from d3. The only thing that can be very troubling for black here is the time. He has 1 minute 23 seconds to convert it. Ashwin has 1 minute 55 seconds. He plays his king to c3. I'm still very calm, but I should be playing faster. Knight e5, attacking the bishop on f3, bishop e2, quite solid. Now d4 check still was possible, but I was not sure whether I should be committing it or not, so I played a5, fixing all of these pawns on light squares. Ashwin went h5. This was a good move now, still gaining more space in the position, but my next move, very nice, g5, fixing the pawns on the light squares. En passant, played by my opponent. Now knight takes was important, because if I take with the knight, I have control over the f4 square, but instead I take with the h pawn, and after f4, knight d7, white has to play a good move here, g5, fixing the pawns on the light square, but he goes bishop f3, allowing me to play f6 here. And now king to d3 is the final mistake, because g5, I'm taking control of the e5 square, the knight jumps in. You can see Ashwin nodding his head there. He knows that he's going to lose it. I just calculate if the pawn endgame is winning for me or not. Here d4 was possible. I take on f3, king f3, and bring my king into e5. With 42 seconds left, this should not be difficult to win, because at the right time I can just give up my d pawn and then enter with f4 and pick up both the black pawns. That's the way to win this. Ashwin just trying to see if there is any chance of a fortress over here, but none seem to exist here. Endings in that way are a little bit sad, because once you get a lost position, you can't really change many things. There are not enough dynamics in the position. So d4 check, as mentioned, I'm going to sack my d pawn to make my king enter the position. d2, king takes d2, the king moves in. On the queen side, no passers can be created for white, and the g4 and f5, both the pawns are being lost. So king e2, king takes g4, king e3, and after king takes f5, 2 pawns down, Ashwin resigns. A very, very intense game, but here it was very important to learn a few things from this game, which I'll just show in the next slide. The first important thing to learn is that after check, you should know the opening, and bishop d2 is not a good move here. The second thing that I would say was an important moment is here, when I should have taken on c6 with the pawn and clearly better opening up my bishop. It often happens in chess when you think that your opponent is slightly lower rated than you want to play for a win, you want to imbalance the position, but objectively b takes c6 is a bad move, and Ashwin got a lot of counterplay. After knight e7 check, king h8, he instantly, without much thought, took on c8. But if he had played knight d5, the point is that after bishop d5, there is no way to stop rook e7 coming in the position. For example, bishop b7, rook e7, takes, rook c6, rook d3. The rook can swing over to a3 or even just go to e3 and double down the 7th rank, and this would have been a big trouble for me. The final instructive moment of this game was in this position, where white should have and always fix the pawns on the light squares here for his opponent and his pawns on the opposite color of his bishop. In the long run, this could have become weaknesses. Although this position is still winning for black, g5 should have been played in that position.